What is going on, everybody? It is your boy J Ray from Ray Photography coming at you with a podcast, and today we are going to be finishing the exposure triangle talking about ISO. If you haven't watched my other two episodes, I recommend you go check them out now. It'll help provide some context for this one. Also, if you haven't noticed, I've had different backdrops and different formats for each episode. I'm really liking this one. I've been messing around with everything, trying to figure out what the best setup is. And I really like this one, so most likely moving forward, this will be the format that you guys will see. Also, this episode is going to be a little shorter than the other two, just because ISO is a pretty simple topic and there isn't much to it. So anyway, without further ado, let's get into things. So, what is ISO? Basically speaking, and honestly, the entire definition really is just your camera's image sensor's sensitivity to light. And that's all there really is to it. So what exactly does that mean though? Basically speaking, the higher your ISO number is, the more sensitive your sensor will be to light. Meaning that a very small bit of light is going to be brighter with a higher ISO than it would be with a lower ISO number. The reasoning really, it's kind of like a cheat in a sense. It's to help you get your proper exposure without having to adjust your aperture or shutter speed. Now, it's not something that you want to just throw around willy-nilly. You don't want to crank up your ISO just so you don't have to mess around with your shutter speed and aperture. I recommend making sure that you have the best aperture and shutter speed before you adjust your ISO. And why is this? It's because the higher up your ISO number is, the more noisy your images will get. So base ISO for most cameras is 100. Some go lower, but generally speaking, it's 100. And that is going to be your cleanest and crispest image with the best colors, the best dynamic range. It's going to be the best image overall. As you start moving up, you go to 200, you go to 400, you go to 800. As you keep increasing that number, you're going to get more noise. So that's basically when you see pictures and they have just noise pretty much, like grain, little dots all over the place. The higher up ISO the more you crank up your ISO, the more noise you're gonna get, the less colors you're going to, not less colors necessarily, but the less like proper colors, right? So the camera is trying to replicate exactly what it sees, and the higher up your ISO is, the harder time it has replicating those colors on the sensor. That I'm trying to think if there's anything else. That's mostly pretty much what ISO is. Sensitivity to light. You have different situations where you want to crank it up and you want to let it low. If you're outside in natural light, you really don't want to crank up your ISO. As I'm saying, you always want to have the lowest possible ISO. So you're outside in natural light, you can generally go with a really fast shutter speed and have a low ISO, which is going to create crystal clear images. If you're doing like sports photography or you're doing anything indoors, you're going to have like a medium kind of ISO. So generally like anywhere from 400 maybe to 6400. You really don't want to go above 6400. That's where most cameras these days are going to start blowing out and you're going to get pretty unusable images. The only reason you'd ever want to go up that high, unless you like really have to, is when you're doing like action or astrophotography or like nighttime photography in general. And even that's going to be really difficult because you don't want that blown out image. But in astrophotography, generally, you don't see as much of the noise. You're super focused on all the different stars and the galaxies and whatnot. But if you're not shooting out at nighttime and you're not doing astrophotography, you really don't want to have your ISO bumped up. Like if you really have to. But I mean, these days, these cameras, man, it's windy outside. I don't know if you can hear that or not. These days, cameras are getting really, really good with their sensors and having really good ISO. So you can go up to 6400, 128, 1280, whatever it is. Sorry, I'm hearing weird noises. I hope you guys can hear that. It's kind of freaking me out here. So yes, these cameras these days have much better ISO sensitivity. So you can go higher up and have less noise. The problem not really a problem, but if you have like an older camera, you're not going to have as great of a sensitivity. So just because 6400 looks like this on one camera doesn't mean it's going to look like this on a different camera. It all depends on the sensor you have, what kind of brand you have, all that pretty much will decide what kind of image quality you're going to get. And like, you know, it kind of falls in the same topic. It's not exactly ISO, but it falls in the same range when you come to different types of sensors. So in DSLRs and mirrorless cameras, you have either a crop sensor or a full frame sensor. A crop sensor is going to be significantly smaller than a full frame sensor. And because of this, they can't get as much light in. So, you know, going along with ISO, you're going to have to bump up your ISO a lot more than you would if you had a full frame camera in the same exact situation with the same exact settings. So it's something you want to keep in mind when you're investing in different cameras. Full frame is obviously the way to go. If you can get a full frame camera, just do it. There's no turning back from full frame. You're going to get the best image quality, the best overall image quality, hands down. Personally, I do not own any full frame cameras. They cost quite a bit. But, you know, if you're looking to step up your photography game, there is a noticeable difference between crop sensors and full frame sensors when it comes to image quality. Also, the amount of megapixels in your sensor does matter when it comes to light being let in and your ISO sensitivity. So a lot of cameras these days are having super high megapixel counts. You know, we're getting up to like 46 and like 80 and whatever. We're getting really high numbers. Before it was maybe like, you know, 8, 10, 15, 20. But now we're getting into the 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond. And really the only problem with this, you're going to get super crisp images. You're going to be able to blow them up. You're going to be able to zoom in, and you're going to have a ton of data there. Because think about each megapixel basically as the amount of pixels that you're getting per frame, whatever. The more pixels you're going to get, the more you can zoom in and out and not lose image quality, like in post. The problem with that is that the sensor size does not change. You have the same exact sensor size, but a bunch of smaller pixels. And because the pixels are getting so small and tiny, they can't let in as much light per pixel. And because of that, you're going to need to bump up your ISO a little bit. So something to keep in mind, like my current camera, I think is 33 megapixels, but I'm looking to upgrade to a full frame 20 megapixel sensor. Just because less megapixels, I'll get more light in. I want to bump up my ISO as much. Full frame sensor. It's going to be great. That's pretty much it. That's the completion of the exposure triangle. Kind of anticlimactic. I'm like rambling on a little bit, but it's really hard to talk about ISO a lot because there isn't all that much to talk about. Sensitivity to light. That's it. Higher up, you're going to get more grain. Lower down, less grain. You're trying to correct your exposure when you can't change your aperture and shutter speed. I don't know what to do, guys. It's crazy. I think about when I first started. It's only been like a month and a half. It's not like it's been years. But when I first did aperture, I was like, oh, like I'm fine. There's only gonna be 3 videos, but I was gonna be set for a while. And now I'm kind of trying to figure out what I want to do next. So if you guys have any recommendations, anything you want to learn about, any topic you want me to go more in depth with photography, or it could be anything really. It could be any topic ever. Photography is just like my niche because I do it so much. But if you guys have anything you want me to talk about, leave it down in the comments. Let me know in our discussion after you watch this video. Hope you enjoyed. Thank you for tuning in. Be cool.